Hello, this is Spellbinder with an update on the S510 Food Safety Regulation Bill. It seems the bill has been passed just over three hours or so ago with a vote of 73-25. Very close to what my video yesterday said it was going to be. With the pre-voting, they've already made up their mind they were going to pass this one way or another. The good news is that the tester amendment was added to the bill to protect the small farmer from all the paperwork and stuff they would have to go through if that amendment wasn't added in there. And it was done by a Senator Democrat from Montana, whose name is Mr. Tester, and he's had the amendment added in. It's in with the bill. The Organic Growers Association seems to be satisfied with the amendment being in there. They wish the bill would fail. They even mentioned that it has a possibility it could still fail, but it has passed. It's on its way for Obama to pencil whip it into law. And this is the article that they got from the New York Times. Senate passes overhaul of food safety regulations. Washington. The Senate on Tuesday passed a sweeping overhaul of the nation's food safety system after recalls of tainted eggs, peanut butter, and spinach that sickened thousands and led major food makers, that's who were behind this, to join consumer advocates in demanding stronger government oversight. Yes, the major ones wanted it, even though they were the ones that did it, and it wasn't the mom and pop farms that had the tainted food. That's why I think it's in there, something in there to make them get rid of the small farms. I still believe they're going to try to get rid of the small mom and pop farms. It says the legislation, which passed by a vote of 73-25, which was predicted to be 74-25 over the weekend, has passed with that. It was definitely going to pass. It seemed like they were bent out of hell to pass that. Remember, the Democrats are mad because you voted them out of the Senate. Would greatly strengthen the Food and Drug Administration, an agency that in recent decades focused more on policing medical products than ensuring the safety of foods. The bill is intended to get the government to crack down on unsafe food before they harm people rather than after outbreaks occur. I'd like to see how that's going to work. Despite the usual bipartisan support on Capitol Hill and a strong push from the Obama administration, the bill could still die because there might not be enough time for the usual haggling between the Senate and the House of Representatives, which passed its own version last year. Top House Democrats said that they would consider simply passing the Senate version to speed approval. Just hurry up and get it done. We got to hurry up and take away people's freedom of not eating genetically altered foods. Both versions of the bill would grant the FDA new powers to recall tainted foods, increase inspections, demand accountability from food companies, and oversee farming. But neither version would consolidate overlapping functions at the Department of Agriculture and nearly a dozen other federal agencies that oversee various aspects of food safety, making the coordination among the agencies a continuing challenge. While food safety advocates and many industrial groups preferred the House version because it included more money for inspections and fewer exemptions from the rules it sets out, most said the Senate bill was far better than nothing. Yes, let's pick the lesser of two evils. Instead of just not doing it at all, we're going to go ahead and do it instead of writing it so it actually punishes the big companies that do all the, they're so big. I told you about the chickens in the 12-inch cages, and I mean, they live, poop, and eat and drink there and lay eggs, and you wonder why there's salmonella. I mean, it's just salmonella came from that. It's just, and they don't do this on small farms because they're like, they're like let out in the yard and stuff, able to run around and stuff, and they're in hen houses. That this is not the same. Believe me, you gotta watch some of the documentaries on it. This is an historic moment, says Eric Olson, deputy director of the Pew Health Group, an adversary group For the first time in over 70 years, the Senate has approved an overhaul of the FDA's food safety law that will help ensure that the food we put in our kitchen tables will be safer and GMO certified. Among the Senate bill's last major sticking points was how it would affect small farmers and food producers. Some small farms and organic food advocates warned that the legislation would destroy their industry under a mountain of paperwork, and Senator John Tester, a Democrat of Montana, pushed for a recent addition to the bill that exempts producers with less than $500,000 a year in sales who sell most of their food locally. That provision led the United Fresh Produce Association, a trade group, to announce recently that it would oppose the legislation since small food operations have been the source of some food recalls in recent years. Oh, really? I haven't heard anything about small things. 500 or 500,000 chickens or more. I don't think Small Farmer Joe has more than a couple hundred. Let's see, but Randy Napier of Medina, Ohio, said the Senate bill was better than nothing. Mr. Napier's 80-year-old mother, Nellie Napier, died in January 2009 after the nursing home in which she lived continued to feed her contaminated peanut butter even after she got sick. Well, that's not the producer's fault. That sounds like the nursing home was trying to get rid of her, unfortunately to say. They do that. I worked at one, and believe me, I've seen things you don't want to know about. I am appalled at what I have found out since my mother's death about how poorly food is regulated and how these companies cut corners to save money, Mr. Napier said. The staunch opposition to Senator Tom Coburn, an Oklahoma Republican, forced months of delay and eventually acquired Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, the socialist enemy of the country, of Nevada, to call a series of time-consuming procedural votes to end debate. Mr. Coburn offered his own version of the legislation, eliminating many of its requirements because he said less regulation was needed, not more, but that version failed. Despite Mr. Coburn's opposition, the bill is one of the only major pieces of bipartisan legislation to emerge from this Congress. Some Republicans and Democrat Senate staff members, who in previous terms would have seen each other routinely, met for the first time during the food negotiations. The group bonded over snacks, specifically Starburst candies, from a staff member of Senator Mike Enzi of Wyoming Republican, and jelly beans from a staff member of Senator Richard J. Durbin of Illinois Democrat. And in the midst of negotiations, the negotiators, nearly all women, took a field trip to the nearby food market so that a Republican staff member could teach the Democrats how to buy high-quality steaks. That's very important for the farmer bills. I mean, that's a joke, isn't it? This legislation means that parents who tell their kids to eat their spinach can be assured that it won't make them sick. Well, yeah, if you grow it down in Mexico and they use human waste to grow it in, of course it's going to get that, or somehow human waste gets in with the product. That's where that comes from, that salmonella. But, who knows? Said Senator Tom Harkin, a Democrat from Iowa, who, as chairman of the Senate Health Committee, shepherded the legislation through months of negotiation. Health advocates are hoping the legislation will rekindle the progress now stalled that the nation once enjoyed in reducing the tens of millions of food contamination illness that occurred each year. In the case of toxic salmonella, infections may be creeping upward. Wonder why? Like I said, the 12-inch chicken cave and the factory egg producers. Let's see. Part of the problem is the growing industrialization and globalization of nation's food supply. That's it. You're right. That's spot on. Nearly a fifth of the nation's food supply, as much as 3/4 of its seafood, are imported, but the FDA inspects less than 1 pound in a million of such imported foods. The bill gives the FDA more control over food imports, which is a good thing, includes increased inspection of foreign processing plants, which is a good thing, and the ability to set standards on how fruits and vegetables are grown abroad. That could be a good or a bad thing, depending if they demand GMO food to be grown or not, or natural food. And as the food suppliers grow in size, problems one facility can sicken thousands all over the country. The Peanut Corporation of America's contaminated paste was included in scores of cookie snacks made by big and small companies who got it from one big company that made all that peanut butter. Think about it. The legislation would raise standards at such plants by demanding that the food companies write plans to manufacture food safely and conduct routine tests to ensure that the plans are adequate. The bill would give the FDA the power to demand food recalls. The Bush administration for years opposed such power, saying that the food manufacturers invariably compelled when asked the government to undertake a recall. But last year the FDA asked the distributors of pistachios to recall its entire 2008 crop after tests showed salmonella contamination at its processing plant. Days passed before the company complied. The legislation greatly increases the number of inspections the FDA must conduct of food processing plants, with the emphasis on the food that are considered most high risk, although figures out of which one are riskiest is an uncertain science. Until recently, peanut butter would not have made the list. Yeah, but you got one factory making several billion tons of it, so what do you expect? I mean, at least thousands of tons. Whether the agency gets its money to conduct such inspections is far from certain. The House version would require food producers to pay a modest annual fee to help fund inspections, but the provisions was excluded from the Senate version. The Senate bill also requires grocery stores to post predominantly a list of recently recalled foods or alert consumers in other ways, a provision championed by Senator Kristen Gillibrand, a Democrat from New York. Excuse me if I don't pronounce his name right. I have a horrible time with people's names, pronounce them correctly, because I'm not really sure how they want it pronounced. Neither version of the bill applies to slaughterhouses or most meat and poultry processing plants, which are under the jurisdiction of the Agricultural Department. Both versions would affect about 80% of the food supply, including fresh fruits and vegetables, eggs, dairy products, and processed foods that do not contain meat. Interesting. Wonder why the meat industries aren't being dragged in with this. CDS, CDS, the contaminated brain-eating viruses and meat. Industry organizations backed by legislative push because of the high costs of many companies for the food scares of recent years. Egg sales fell nationwide after the massive egg recall this summer, even though only 2 producers were implicated. Several years ago, contaminated spinach from one small producer led an entire industry crop to be destroyed. One small producer is one giant factory farm. Believe me. In other words, he didn't have any other business going, like corn and other things. Judith McGarry, an executive director of Farms and Ranch Freedom Alliance, an advocacy group that sees government regulations a threat to small farms, said she was satisfied with changes made to the bill to reduce paperwork for small farmers and exempt them from some requirements. We still have concerns about the scope of the power of the FDA and its tendency to write rules and regulations that favor agribusinesses instead of small farmers, Ms. McGarry said. Scott Favor, a spokesman for the Grocery Manufacturers Association and trade group that represents the most largest food processors, said the food sales in the United States and abroad depend on people believing that the food is safe. Consumer trust is the foundation of every food companies do, and the industry recognizes the need a stronger partner at the FDA. If we're going to go restore trust in the safety of our food supplies, Mr. Farber said. The consumer advocates were jubilant. Everyone who eats will benefit, says Carolyn Smith DeWell, a food safety director at the Center of Science and Public Interest, an advocacy group. The FDA will have new tools to help ensure that we have the safest food supply that causes fewer outbreaks and illnesses. So there you have it. That's the article. Now, what do you think? You think this is going to work? I'm waiting to see other write-ups on this. There are stories written up on more details of what powers the FDA does have over the small farmer. Because they really said that they got less control over them for paperwork, but how much control for inspections. You should read the bill itself about the inspections. Once every 2 years, once every 3 years, and once every 5 years. And I think the small farmers is under every 5 years. They were having an inspector come in and tear through their place with white gloves. Well, until next time, this is Spellbinder. I gotta get going. Time's up. Be good or be good at it. and watch what you eat. Could be dangerous. Good day.